Welcome to Oilers Live Podcast. This is episode 28. I've got as my guests, I've got Kelly from beerleagueheroes.com and Eric Friesen, who is a contributor for Oil on White. Thanks for joining me tonight, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
No worries.
So, guys, we were just talking about this before we started recording. There's not, in maybe what is probably one of the quietest off seasons for the Oilers, there's not a ton for us to talk about, and I'm not too upset about that. But we're just gonna kind of have some fun tonight, to chat about a couple things. We mentioned, or we talked prior to recording, about the developmental camp. Of course, we'll touch on Ryan Strome's new contract, 2-year contract. Maybe talk a little bit about Nurse and whatever else comes to mind. Feel free to bring it up. Let us start with the news of the day. So if you haven't heard already, it's Ryan Strome has signed 2 years at, if I'm not mistaken, it's just over 3.1. Is that right? Anybody know for sure?
$3 million for this year and 3.2 for next year. So yeah, it's a 3.1 cap hit.
Okay, so Eric, you know the details. What do you think about the contract?
Well, I think that we couldn't expect to get him for much cheaper than that. He was coming in off a $2.5 million contract. Ideally, that's what you'd love to get the guy for. But, I think they were looking at some comparables around the league. There's one guy. I can't think of the name at the moment, but he was pretty comparable to Strome in terms of the role he played in his production. So I'm pretty sure his agent used that as sort of like the template for the contract that Strome was going to get. So I think that getting him for just a sliver over $3 million for a third line center is a reasonable price tag for the guy.
Yeah, I personally don't disagree. Kelly, what's your thoughts on the contract?
I think it's just fine. $3 million, give or take a little bit. You weren't going to get him any cheaper because he was qualified at 3, so they weren't allowed to sign him for any cheaper than that without letting him go, right? So for a third line center, $3 million is completely acceptable, I think. I think last season at the end there we saw him creating a little bit of chemistry with Puljujärvi, and that's really something I'm going to be keeping an eye on if they keep Jesse on the third line next season.
Yeah, I think we got a pretty good potential for a fairly potent third line. It just like you said, if Puljujärvi stays there, because with Bouchard, I think he scored 11 goals last year. Maybe he's got 15 in him. I'd like to think that Ryan Strome isn't going to be a 13-goal guy. I think he's going to hopefully be closer to 20 with those two. So if we can get, 55 goals out of that line, I think that's a pretty productive third line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I think for me it's a little bit optimistic. If we get 13's not bad for Strome for me. I think I wouldn't mind to see him see an uptick in his assists a little more. But 20's not easy to get anymore. 20 goals, especially on a third line.
There's actually quite a few guys. Like, we'd like to see Puljujärvi get an uptick in assists too. Drake Caggiula. It's kind of weird how we got so many guys who have their goal totals are higher than their assists. You don't normally see that many guys on one team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. I think Bouchard shot a little bit above his level last year. He's pretty lucky getting that many goals. But if he can get 12 to 15 a year, I'm pretty happy with that from Kyra. And I would expect 16 to 20 from Puljujärvi next season. But I would also expect his assist to shoot up quite a bit too.
I think he hits 20 for sure. I'm not thinking. I heard some guys. I know Low Tide was saying 18 to 25 for him. I think he's going to be on the higher end of that. Not saying he's going to reach 25. I mean, that would be, if he hits 25, that's a huge win for us.
Absolutely.
But let's say I'm thinking maybe 21, 22. That's a realistic total for me, especially if he gets some power play time.
Well, that's the thing. Right? It's all dependent on how much power play time he gets. And for me, I feel like Puljujärvi is going to take the next step next season. It'll be his first year where he doesn't have the AHL kind of hanging over him, and the club's really gonna. I feel like they're gonna push him a little more into the special teams area, whether that be the first unit or the second unit. I'm not entirely sure, but they're gonna give him a push this year, because if it works out, then they'll start to see what they wanted to when they drafted him, right? And if it doesn't, then they know they got to trade him. Not that I'd want that, but that's what's on the table.
Yeah, and I really hate that logic. How a lot of people are saying you got to trade him. And who was it on the radio the other day? I think it was Button who was saying something like he might be a late bloomer, but late bloomers rarely ever reach the fruit of their ability on the team that drafted him. It's always the next team or the team after. You look at a guy like Blake Wheeler, and I think that's the wrong mentality. Even if he is a late bloomer, so what? Let's let him bloom with us, even if it takes him until he's 22, 23 to start hitting it out of the park. Let's not give up on him and trade him for a Justin Falk or a Jeff Skinner right away. I would way rather have 20-year-old Jesse Puljujärvi with his skill set and his body type.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And let's not forget, guys. Let's not forget. I mean, we've got a whole, with the exception of McClellan, we've got a whole new coaching staff here, and I think these guys are quite capable of working with some young guys and maybe developing them a little bit more. I think, as we all know, as Oilers fans, we're guilty of giving up on guys, right? And that's not just from the fan level, but from the organization level. And if there's some consistency this year, I mean, the conversation started because we were talking about Strome. I mean, this was his first year with the Oilers. He pretty much was a utility player last year until the end of the season. And, for him to have some consistency, maybe have a couple line mates, Puljujärvi was the same thing. I mean, it really felt, for all of the things that the Oilers did wrong last year, we were constantly talking about player utilization. And if this year these players are used properly, if we get 20 goals out of Puljujärvi, I'll be happy. I mean, I'd be happy with just him showing that he belongs in the league on a consistent basis. And I think, there's been a lot of talk from all the Finnish folks that end up on Twitter that are Oiler fans about how, slow Puljujärvi is, to ramp up to speed in every league, in every division he's ever played. It's taken him a couple of years. So I expect some good things out of him this year, for sure.
And maybe he doesn't even need to be the top offensive line driver that a lot of people want him to be when he's picked. When he's picked with a 4th overall pick, you have those really high expectations for him point wise. Maybe he can be a guy who just keeps the puck alive in the offensive zone and is hustling back on the back check, and he can contribute in other ways than just putting up 80 points a year.
Yeah, the other thing, even if it takes Puljujärvi a little while to get going, that's fine for the Oilers' salary cap too. He won't cost the Oilers as much as a guy getting 50 points a year would if he breaks out this year, and this year being his contract year, right? And then to add just Strome, he kind of found his way when the Oilers started using him and Kyra exclusively on the PK, and I think that's where he's gonna find his fit as a pro hockey player, because the Oilers kind of turned it around a little bit when they started using Kyra and Strome on the penalty kill there instead of like Kujula or Kazian and whatnot, right? So
let me ask you guys this question here. What do you think about this contract for Strome in terms of the team and for that matter the NHL saying, look, you're worthy of a 2-year $3 million contract? Does that give something to Strome a little bit more confidence? Something he's not had. I mean, the talk about him was whether he'd even stick, right? I mean, there was some question about whether he was an NHLer for a little while, right? In the roles that he could play. But this is, this is really, a contract that says, hey, you're meant to be here. What do you guys think that means for a guy like him?
I don't know if that's the confidence boost that he needs. Does a dollar figure really tell you, this is what we believe in you? I think it's opportunity more than anything. The fact that they're saying, like, you're coming into camp and the third line center spot, is yours to lose, basically. And there's going to be guys competing for it too, like Kyle Brodziak, although I think he's going to be more in the fourth line. But Bouchard, Kara can play center. Maybe they're going to be competing for that spot. And I don't know. I think that just because he got $3 million a year, I don't know if that's necessarily the boost of his confidence.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily referring to the dollar value so much. I mean, this is, I look at Strome and I look, even a couple of years ago, right? And even when the Oilers traded for him, he was a relative unknown in terms of what you were going to get. And I think he kind of, that back half of the season, to your point, Kelly, where he was playing with Kara, maybe getting some more consistent minutes, being utilized a little bit more along the lines of where he should be, which is, a third liner, bit of an energy player. I think that the fact that he was qualified, given a contract, this is, a bit of a vote of confidence in itself. Dollar value doesn't really matter, but I mean, I'm certain it probably does to him. It would to me, but it's the contract itself. Yeah, contract itself, right? Like, I think this is kind of the one that says to him, "Look, I'm here now, right? I've got an opportunity to really make it and carve out a niche for myself, which is, that third line center role." I think we're starting to see what Ryan Strome really is, rather than, what he was pegged to be when he first got to the Islanders. That's my thought on it.
I'm sure he's happy about it.
Yeah. So, guys, I mean, what we've been kind of going towards here is what the depth chart really looks like with the Oilers this year. And, there's been a lot of questions. Quite often, what you're seeing is Connor on the first line with Nuge and Ratty, but a lot of people are putting Leon on the second line with Puljujarvi and Lucic. Is that what you guys see as our second line? If if things are as they are right now, coming out of camp, maybe Kelly.
I would see it that way. As much as, like, I think Puljujarvi could start on the third line and maybe Reeder up on the second line. But I definitely see Lucic back up in the top six. I think the coaches will do him that favor and give him that opportunity from the get-go. And if he can't grab it, then they'll drop him down to the third line, which isn't that bad either, because he'll get his opposition won't be as talented, so maybe he'll find his way again, kind of like he did near the very end of last season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's pretty fluid, and I like that. I like that the forward group is, you can move it around a little bit, bar like a few names, right? The fourth line should be an interesting one with Brodziak and Kazian. There's some big bodies. I wonder if they'll put Kajula on the left wing there.
Yeah,
and just make it a good energy line. But we still have Pontus Aberg to fit in there somewhere, and there's still, like, the pundits are saying that they still need to add another forward, which I don't really see why they need to add another forward after that.
Yeah, well, that's something that Chiarelli, said in his presser there. He said, I'm still looking to add one more forward. So that's where they're getting that from. I'm kind of with you on that. I keep looking at the lineup and looking at what's available. Staples mentioned possibly adding a Duclair. Stauffer's been big on adding Chimera.
Yeah,
A
vet, right?
Yeah,
like I'm all for adding another vet, but I do wonder, like, at what point do the guys in the AHL that have been there for a season or more get their chance? Do you know what I mean? And
well, that's just it. Like we got Brad Malone sitting in the minors. I mean, can't he be the 14th forward? We're already paying him. What did he get? I think he got $1.3 million for 2 years or something like that. So why bring in another body when he can just be that 14th forward, and then he doesn't have to be taking away ice time in Bakersfield from someone who needs it. He can be sitting in the press box up in Edmonton, and that's probably better using him than having him play a top 6 role down there and pushing one of our top prospects further down the lineup.
Yeah, not only that, but he's a pretty good comparable to Hendricks too, right, in terms of playing style.
Oh yeah.
So I guess it all depends on what that 14th forward's expectations are. Like, do they want a 14th forward that can jump into the top 6, someone that can score and skate and have some skill, like Aberg, or do they need a guy that's going to fill in the bottom 6, with a little more grit and sandpaper and defensive acumen like that, right? I don't know. Maybe they're foreseeing some injury issues down the line. But yeah, I'm kind of would like to promote from within if it's at all possible.
100%. Oh, sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. This lineup that we've put together. I mean, in asking for or talking about adding in another forward. Well, I think this looks at last season as being the norm, right? Whereas if you look at the season before, right, it depends on what's the blip, right? Was it the season before where the Oilers made the playoffs, or was it last season? And, if it was last season was the blip, we've got a playoff team, right? In fact, I'd say we've added to the team, and hopefully we get more out of guys like that. Most of us believe have something more to give. Let's start with Lucic, right? I think there's a lot of fans out there that know and understand what Lucic brings to a team. Last year was an off season, right? Guys like Zach Kassian. I mean, I think last year he had an off season, right? He should be. Somebody mentioned, I think Kelly, you were in that conversation on Twitter about, somebody feeling like he was maybe held back a little bit last year.
I had a couple
Is
ideas.
That true? I don't know.
I wondered if the coaching staff challenged Lucic and Kassian to play a more skilled game, and they, instead of doing what they're known for and what they're good at, they tried to change it up a little bit. And I also wondered if Kassian got hurt in game 1 when he got in that fight and got all bloodied up, and he wasn't the same after that. So it's one of those things, right? I'm not sure if he's going to be, even if he's going to be with the team come game 1, right? That's another name that's really prominent in the trade rumors. If they want to, like, for example, if they want to fit a Pat Maroon in, they could sign Darnell Nurse to a bridge just over $3 million, and they have enough cap room to sign Pat Maroon if they trade Zach Kassian for futures or picks.
Yeah, is that some place you would go? Would you get Pat Maroon back on this team? I mean, now that you've had some time for sober thought on it, would you bring him back?
With Pat Maroon, the way that I saw it with him is he played. He didn't really change his playing his style, right? He played emotionally throughout the entire season, whether he was hurt or not, and whether he was scoring or he wasn't scoring. And I like that about him. Whereas like Lucic, once he really got in that mire, right, he squeezing his stick real hard, and he just couldn't get it going, and he was kind of taking it out on the bench and whatnot. And Kassian, whatever happened, he just couldn't get his mojo back last year. And I wonder having a group of those guys together, they kind of lean on each other. And Maroon being the more outgoing of the three, maybe that kind of took away from Lucic and Maroon.
Yeah, you could be right there, Eric. Remember beginning of last season? I mean, the talk was there was some rumor about Nurse and Draisaitl having problems, and that was part of the problem of the Oilers. You think? Yeah. I mean, that was obviously just poor reporting or poor rumors and whatever. What's your thought on if you had a chance maybe to move somebody out this year, would you move anybody out right now? Would you pick up Maroon? That has been a conversation piece for a lot of people. I think we can safely say between the three of us, we're rational enough to realize that Lucic is likely back, at least for the beginning of the season. What do you see for the Oilers if if Chiarelli's going to make some moves? Anything that you kind of think might happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd love to have Patrick Maroon back. I mean, a guy who should be able to still score 20 goals a year, hopefully at least for this year and maybe next year, and a guy who has excellent chemistry with Connor McDavid. I mean, how many guys have we seen filter through that spot and haven't been able to stick there? 5 or 6 guys who've been, tried up there, and Maroon's had the best success. I don't think you can bring in Maroon if you still have Lucic though. And I'm sure if you asked most Oiler fans who they would rather have on this team right now, it would be Patrick Maroon 100%. that they would rather not only get rid of Lucic's cap hit, but also have a more skilled, better player at this point in his career. There's no question that Lucic has had the better NHL career, but Maroon is the better player today, and he's a better fit for Connor. He doesn't have the quickest boots either, but they're quicker than Lucic's. And really, he's a guy who's going to, maybe come down a little bit in price point here just because we're getting further and further away from July 1st now, and maybe the top suitors are kind of, now out of the running for him, so he's going to have to lower his asking price a bit. And that could be a fit for the Oilers. But another guy you mentioned, Cassian, come playoff time, 100%. I think that he's a guy that you want. We look how impactful he was in that series against San Jose. You could argue he was the third most important player in that series behind Talbot and McDavid. So he does come through in the crunch time. There are some times during the regular season where it does seem he's a little bit uninterested. Maybe that's not the right word, but he just doesn't seem to bring it the way that he does come playoff time. And having a forward who's making just under $2 million on your fourth line also isn't really ideal, especially for the wing position. So if they could get rid of him, I would be all for that. Love the guy. Good for him turning his life around and getting his career back on track here. We thank him for everything. But the Oilers really have to watch their pennies at this point. And I don't think that that's a guy they can be affording to pay at that price point. So I would try and move out Cassian, and if Lucic was to come off the books this summer, which it doesn't look like it's going to happen, it's probably going to be next summer if he's traded at all, because then the contract's much more movable. Then you could bring in a guy like Maroon. But I should also pose this question to you guys while I have the chance. Are we just assuming that Yamamoto's automatically on Bakersfield to start the year?
I personally, I think that would be my assumption. But you know what? I like that. I like having that assumption. If I'm going into camp and that's the expectation, we get to really see what this kid's made of, right? I mean, if you want to make the team, you got to show that you deserve to be there. And it's not.
He showed it last year.
He did show it last year, and he's got to show it again.
5 goals in the 5 goals in the preseason. That's better than anyone on the team had in the preseason. I think I don't even think McDavid hit 5 goals, although he only played like 4 games, and Yamamoto was in pretty much every preseason game. But the point being, like, I think if Ratty doesn't knock it out of the park in the first 20 games with Nugent Connor, then Yamamoto's going to get a chance in that spot. He's going to be coming in hungry. I don't want to skip too far ahead because we were going to do developmental camp talk later, but that looked like a kid who was motivated. He wasn't all smiles like last year in camp. He had like a serious face on, and you could tell this kid was coming to play. So I think that this fall, he's going to be really pushing for that spot. He's going to look at Ty Ratty and say, okay, you think that's your spot? Well, I'm coming for it too, because I had a taste of playing with Connor last year and I really liked it. So I'm coming for that spot, and he's smart enough and skilled enough to play with him. I would not be surprised. Now, that's not, I should preface this by saying that's not an ideal place for a 20-year-old rookie to be playing top line minutes against the best defenders every night. But I think that he's not going to just sit back and say, well, I guess I'm resigned to the fact that I'm going to Bakersfield. He's coming to play this fall.
Yeah, good. And that's exactly what I think we need on this team. I don't know that we've necessarily had the push from the bottom, right? Like the guys that you're expecting to go to Bakersfield that we've needed year over year. We always have a couple of talented guys, but you need guys like that are going to push, the Ty Ratties and the Pugliarvis and to some extent, even the new guys like Reeder and even Kajula, right? Like we need guys that are going to push these guys to be better and not just, be good enough, right? Like they need to earn their spot every night. Guys, I'm thinking about one thing, and we're talking all about the offense right now. The offense, is it fixed if we got a power play this coming year? Right? Like we had no power play, right? Like we had guys like Draisaitl and Connor and Nuge and Lucic that had, next to what I would consider no points on the power play last year, who still, Lucic, like if you take out the back half of his season, he started out well, right? And
oh yeah, like up until Christmas, he was putting up points at a pretty good clip.
If we have a power play next year, is most of what we're worried about, is that really like, is that 90% of it? Is it 80% of the problem? What do you guys think? Maybe Kelly, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, if the special teams kicks it up a notch and they're both in the top 10, that's going to be a plus in the standings. What you'd think, right? Yeah, I think that I can foresee them having a much better power play and a very improved penalty kill, just from the coaching standpoint too. Just getting those new guys in and getting a fresh viewpoint on what happened last year and what they can do to improve it this year.
Now, SPR did say if the penalty kill's not any better this year, he'll drink a bucket of bleach.
That's a tough bet. I mean, let's hope that Talbot doesn't get injured.
That's right. Yeah.
How can it not be though? Like we talked about it earlier in the podcast. Let's say you have one unit of Jujar Kara and Ryan Strome, who showed to be a fairly capable PK unit in a short sample. Now let's say we have a second unit of Tobias Reeder and Kyle Brodziak up front. I think that those are two pretty good penalty kill units.
But not even that. Like, that McDavid and Hopkins are going to be another unit.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? They'll put those guys on at the end of the PK and go for that goal.
Oh yeah, I mean, depending on.
So that's.
I loved when Nuge ran our power play. Like that little quick shot that he'd do at the net seemed to always take the goalie off by surprise. And
oh yeah, he's got a deceptive shot, and I agree. Before Connor got there, he was the man on the PK for like 4 years, basically his first 4 years in the NHL.
Yeah. So I think. To both, I think we're all saying the same thing. It can't not be better next year. I'm doing the double negatives now. It's definitely going to be better next year. I'm just, there's some thoughts here, right? I mean, like we just on the PK we were so bad. You know, it was awful. It lost a lot of games. There are all these little blips. I mean, it seems to me that there's a lot of folks around the league that are happy to when a team goes on this. Like Vegas, Carlson. Let's take Carlson. Like his shooting percentage was through the roof, right? Mm-hmm. Anytime he threw something at the net, it went in. What do they call that? PDO, right? Is that the stat? It'll go up or down based on shots.
Shots on net, goals, shots around the net. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, you have that and everybody says, okay, well, Carlson's going to come down to earth this year, right? Even on Friedman's 31 Thoughts, he talked about it and how the expectation, and maybe that's why they haven't no contract yet, right? In the Oilers, you got to think the other way, right? Like you can only be so bad for so long and have the worst penalty kill for so long before it kind of reverts back to the norm. And even if our penalty kill was a little bit better, even if we had a couple more first saves last year, if we had a couple power play goals, what are we like? That's like 10, 15, maybe 20 point spread for this team. Changes the whole outlook of where we are. When we went into Christmas, you remember when McClellan finally woke up and realized that, he should have two centers, right? McDavid and Draisaitl, and then he went back to having them on the same line for a while. It was like he was scared not to have them on the same line. But when he had them separate and there was two centers and we went, I think it was 4 games in a row right before Christmas. That team is there. Like this is an incredible team, like a team that has the opportunity to be an offensive powerhouse. And damn it, if if anybody wants to compare centers, like who the best number 1 and number 2 centers are in the league, I would put McDavid and Draisaitl up against any of them. And that's pointed at, certain news outlets and various other things. These two are awesome, right? And as long as, the coaching staff, and I hope that they stay rational throughout the season, they don't get scared, right? And think we need to have them together, right? Then I think we've got a team. It's going to be, all, happiness for Oilers fans for a season. I'm putting all my chips down and saying this team's making the playoffs next year. I'm feeling confident in it. I think last year was a blip. That's where I'm at. Anyway, on that note, I am going to stop the first segment. We're going to take a break. When we get back, let's talk development.
Oilers Live Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Oilers Live Podcast. I've got with me Eric Friesen, contributor for Oil on White, and Kelly from BeerLeagueHeroes.com. Thanks again, guys, for joining me. We're going to do on this second segment, we're going to talk a little bit about Oilers defense and development camp. First up, though, we talked about the forwards for the first segment there. What thoughts, guys? Maybe Eric, if you want to start. Thoughts on defense for this team next year? We're still waiting on what the contract's going to be for Darnell Nurse. What do you think he's going to get? Where do you think we need to go? Do we need to do anything? Clefbaum going to bounce back? These are some of the questions we have. Do we need to add another D? If we can. Obviously, right now we don't have the cap room, but what would you do there? Eric, your thoughts?
Well, Chiarelli's already on record saying that he's not looking to add an offensive defenseman right now. And I think a lot of Oiler fans are content with that because while I'm not a big-time Chiarelli hater like a lot of Oilers fans are, I will say, I mixed opinions on the guy, but I will say that I would prefer that he not try to trade for a Torrey Kruger, whoever, or a Justin Falk. We don't need to be out searching for that guy. I really think that that's going to be Evan Bouchard long term. It doesn't have to be this year. I do think he's going to get the 9-game trial. So I foresee him going to Europe to start the season anyway. But no, I'm expecting that Sekera will be better. He's had a full off season now to train. Last off season he spent the whole time rehabbing, so he wasn't really getting into the type of game shape he needed to be in. And yeah, like you mentioned about Nurse, get him signed as soon as possible. I would lock him up long term. If we could sign him tomorrow for 8 years at a cap hit of $4.5 million, I think we would be super lucky to have that opportunity. Don't let him get a 2-year bridge and then have his value go up to $6 million in 2020. Get him for the good deal right now, just like we got Clefbaum on. And Clefbaum should be better too. Let's not forget he was playing with a banged up shoulder all last season. Basically, we didn't get to see a full healthy Clefbaum. So it's a lot of what ifs. That's true. But if Clefbaum is healthy and Sekera is healthy and Bouchard potentially makes the team, that could make a guy like Chris Russell expendable. So there's a lot of balls in the air right now, but I don't hate the way our defense looks.
Yeah. Friedman also brought up that what he'd heard is a lot of, or I think he said he heard it, but a lot of teams knew Clefbaum was injured, so they exploited that last season. Yeah.
Well, I mean, of course they should. I mean, we as fans could see that he was injured. He wasn't taking those big bombs from the point that we remember from the playoffs in the previous season. It just looked like he wasn't himself. So there was something going on there. And then it comes out late in the year that he actually does have a banged up shoulder. So he gets that surgery done. It probably should have been done months sooner. And then he could have had more time to heal up and train in the off season. But for some reason they kept him playing when they were out of the playoff race. That boggles the mind a little bit.
Okay, so before we move on to development camp, we'll get Kelly's thoughts. But first, I want to hear, Eric, if you're starting the season, Oilers, what's your depth chart on D? Given that you're going to get, Bouchard a little look at the NHL at the very least, where does he slot in? Who sits out? What's your thoughts right now?
I'm getting the pen and paper out here so I can visually see it in front of me. All right. I would probably go Nurse and Larson as my top two. Let's go Clefbaum, Benning, second unit. Third unit to start the season anyway. We'll go Sekera and Bouchard. That would be...
And Russell sits out?
I think that he's going to beat Russell out for a spot. Now, that's another thing. You can't have a $4 million seventh defenseman. So
no.
That's what I think the Oilers are going to do is they're going to give Bouchard his 9 games, and maybe Russell will be slotting in and out of the lineup. Bouchard will be slotting in and out. That 9 games might get dragged over a 15-game period, where Bouchard goes upstairs and watches it from the press box for a couple games to, gain a better vantage point at the NHL level, come back in, play a few, and then after 9, they make a really tough decision on him. That's when I think he goes back to junior, makes the World Junior team, potentially will be the captain, and, have a good chance to win gold on home soil for Canada. Play with the London Knights, maybe get traded to a contender at the deadline, and a year from now, we're talking about him being on this team full time.
Yeah. I mean, he's that close, is my understanding, right? Kelly, your thoughts right now?
Well, the defense looks set to me. Nurse, Larson, Sekera, Russell, Clefbaum, Benning, and deploy them however the opposition dictates, right? I don't think Bouchard should stay, even if he is ready, because there simply isn't the room. You can't tell a guy who just signed a new contract that he's got to sit for the rookie, and you can't tell...
I think you can. I think you can tell that.
You can't tell the veterans that they're going to have to sit so the rookie can get some ice time. So there's just from a team perspective, doing the right thing.
So, guys, let's also not forget, if you heard, I don't know if you heard today, guys, Bachfest is going to London Knights next year.
Yeah, I did hear that.
Right? Yeah. So, that in itself should be sort of a good thing for the Oilers, to have him play with, another, top first rounder, right?
Yeah, I think SBR was all over that. So, I mean, obviously, right? But, it's... I really think that he is going to go back eventually, but he'll get his time. And it's not that I disagree with Kelly completely, but I do think you can tell the veteran that the rookie's going to play over him if he's better than him. We need to have that competitive environment on this team. So if you have to go to Chris Russell and say, look, man, right now, Bouchard's outplaying you. Step up. Then he'll have to... do that. But right now, Bouchard adds a dimension that no one else on the team has, and you can make that argument for Russell that he does something also that no one else on the team does, but a lot of people don't think it's as important, shot blocking. So is $4 million a lot for a guy who is primarily a defensive zone contributor? Probably, yeah, that's a little much. But I could see Russell being on this team for at least one more year, and then next summer you have to maybe look into trading out both Sekera and Russell to make room for Ethan Bear and of course Bouchard.
The way I see it is that they've got Ethan Bear right there. He's already paid his dues in the minors, and he's already had a go in the NHL. So he's already ready to go there. So it doesn't hurt Bouchard to go back to junior. And what I'm saying is that Bouchard can get his 9 games, but he's not going to get his 9 games in a row, right? They're not just going to bang, bang, bang right off the bat. So he'll get a game here and a game there. And I'm not saying he'll get it because he's playing better than a veteran. Because I don't know how the meritocracy works in McClellan's world, but it's a little confusing sometimes. I think it'll be if a defenseman's dinged up, they'll toss him in, and he'll get his game there. So if there's a defenseman that's 50-50 for a night, then they can toss Bouchard in and see how he does, or depending on the opposition, they can toss him in and see how he does.
Yeah, that's what I said too. Yeah.
I haven't heard any news.
What's the word on Sekera, you guys? Have you heard anything? Is he, how's he look?
Yeah, apparently he's good to go because he played World Championship. And I was hearing a lot of people saying that he might choose to sit out that tournament just to have that extra 3 weeks of time to rest his body after playing 36 games with the Oilers and then spend the next 5 months training. But he obviously thought that he was good to go and captain Slovakia at that World Championship in May. So if he was ready to play in that tournament, then that tells me that he's probably a little closer than we think. And, he still has 4 months of this summer to get closer to where he was 2 years ago. I don't know if he's going to fully get there, but at least he's a step ahead of where he was a year ago from right now.
Are we better on defense this year, guys? Kelly, your thoughts?
If it stays healthy.
Yeah.
We only had 2 players that played, I think, more than 72 games or something last year. So a healthy defense, they've already shown us what it can do. And if they stay healthy, they'll be better. Absolutely. The goaltending will be better. The forwards will be better. It's all down to health, man. If they can prevent themselves and from getting injured, that's always a plus, right?
Yeah, there were a lot of injuries. I'm just looking it up right now. The only players who played in every game last year were McDavid, Strome, Lucic, and Nurse.
Yeah. In fact, Sekera played under 40 games last year, right? What about Benning? I mean, he's got to be on the bubble, right? He was kind of on off. Thoughts on him, guys? I mean, you had him slotted in, Eric. You think he's on the team?
He's in my second pairing, actually.
Yeah.
Right now, I think as of right now, he's the second best right shot defenseman on this team. I think he'll eventually be passed by Ethan Bear. I think he'll also, for sure, eventually be passed by Bouchard. But as of today, he can still play in that spot. And if he has to be your number 6 defenseman a couple of years from now just to stay in the league, then so be it. But for today, he still passes the puck fairly well. He's great with the open ice hits. Yeah, he's in my second pairing.
Yeah. Kelly?
Yeah, no, I dig him. He's got a 100+ mile an hour slap shot too. So if they ever get the balls to put him back on the power play, he might be effective there.
Yeah. I mean, power play, right? I mean, that's what it all comes down to. It just seems utilization on the power play last year was awful for, just getting a chance to see some of these guys. Would have loved to see more of Nurse on the power play even. Pugliarvi, yeah, just yeah.
It was so easy to defend them, right? They didn't have a threat from the point, so they just boxed everyone out to the outside. And when they gave the puck to McDavid, they just let him hold on to it the whole time, right? Or they give it to Draisaitl or whoever was the focal point of the Oilers power play. The other team just let the Oilers get it to that player and then just let them hold on to it because they didn't have a point option. They need a threat from the point just to be able to spread things out a little bit, or from the wing.
So Bouchard is that guy, right?
He could be that.
If Bouchard comes in, yeah. Well, I mean, I would project him as that guy. Maybe not next year, but if he comes in the first 9 games, you guys, what do you think? I mean, and he, they slot him, they give him some power play time. What if he fills that void? Does he stay? Is that enough to have him stay, or do you send him down? I think with the addition of Bachvest in London, I'd be, I'd want to be 100% certain that Bouchard was right for the team, even if he had a hell of a nine games. I think, having him go back to London and have a season with somebody like, Bachvest, and the two of them pushing each other to be better all year can only be good for development. So that's my thoughts on it. But do you guys, either of you think that, if he goes on the power play and he's the guy, right, after 9 games, do we keep him or is he an automatic send down?
It's one of those. I mean, sorry, go ahead, Eric.
No, okay. No, you can go, Kelly. Birthday boy, you go.
I think that it won't just be about points with him, right? He'll need to be able to defend on the other side of the puck too, and that's just as important for me because with a healthy defense, the Oilers have threats on both units if they want it. I'm not sure if scoring goals from the point will keep him in the NHL past his 9 games, because it's going to depend on what he does when he doesn't have the puck, right?
It could, though. Like, let's say first game of the year in Sweden against Jersey, let's say he scores a power play goal. Then we go back to North America. He has a so-so game. Next game, let's say he gets another power play goal or power play assist. All of a sudden, Todd McCullough and Peter Schreller are thinking, okay, PP's looking pretty good with this guy, and they keep rolling him out there, and he's being that consistent force on the power play and while playing a third pairing role, sheltered minutes down there with a guy like Sekera. They might think, he's ready for this. If we can keep his 5-on-5 minutes down and just run the hell out of him on the power play, maybe he's ready for that role this year. I think a lot of it's going to come down to his feet. Like, how's his speed going to translate to the NHL game right away? But if he's ready, then I don't see the point in sending him back. My guess still is that he'll go back after 9 games, so they don't burn a year. Because right now they really have to start thinking about having these contracts, these value contracts during Connor and Leon's big deals. So of course, Of course. And they have built up the prospect pool, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, no, I think he could win a spot, but I'm not banking on it.
Well, and we have to start developing players, right? Yeah.
I don't think they have the partner for Bouchard yet. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? They need a guy that can be able to help him out, to help insulate him, and I don't trust any of the defensemen on the team, apart from maybe, kind of like that. You're like Sekera and Russell are fine veteran defensemen that are like into their early 30s, right? But they're not generally known for their high-end defense. Russell's a defensive defenseman, but not really what I'm talking about in that regard. You need a guy that can help a young player out, especially a guy like Bouchard. He might have a cannon of a shot, but the rest of the game he needs to be able to play as well, especially for a defenseman at the NHL. It's a huge jump. It's a huge jump to go from OHL.
Like a Chara-McAvoy combo sort of deal, right?
No, Sekera is a veteran, but do you think that you need a veteran with similar life experiences, because Sekera is from Europe and Bouchard's from Southern Ontario? Are you saying maybe more get a guy who their first language is the same, who grew up similar to him, that can kind of bring him along? Or like, I'm just curious, like, why you think maybe Sekera can't be that guy for him?
I just don't think he's good enough defensively. He's more of a two-way guy, and I want a guy like an Adam Larson, but on the left side, right? I want a cleanup man, if you will, a guy that can clean up all those silly mistakes that rookies make. And I'm not, like, in terms of going into next season for the Oilers, I'm not sure if it's a good idea to have a green teenager on the back end at any point. I think if the Oilers bounce back like we want, or like we're projecting them to, that maybe that's a better project for next season.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, as you said that, I mean, it just sort of clicked in. I mean, one of the things we got to remember, right? I hope that this organization thinks about, because I have this like strange sense that Bouchard is going to come in. He's physically, he can play in the league, right? Like, you look at the guy and he looks like he's 30 years old. Yeah, and so physically he's ready to go, right? But there's so much more to that. And what I don't want to see is for us to go through, a little stretch of bad games and really sort of damage the young guy that's actually there, right? We've got enough guys right now that, can slot in. We've got Ethan Bear, who we've sort of mentioned, but we don't talk maybe enough about, that hopefully is ready to make the next step. I really hope, and that, after those 9 games, we see him sent down. I'm really excited about this Bachfest thing in London, as you can tell. I think having a couple of guys like that play together, is only good. It's good to motivate you and good to get you, you learn off of each other, and London should have a good team next year just based on that, right? Like, if the two of them are there, get that winning culture, right? And then come back to the Oilers. And
not only that, but they could have Tkachuk.
Oh yeah, is he talking about going there too?
It's rumored, but
there's rumors. Not sure if he's going to stay in Boston or not, because their coach changed. I think their coach went to the Rangers, right? So,
oh yeah,
there's a little bit of rumor, and Matthew played there as well, and so they got some nice guys.
Hell, SPR gets all the good hockey, right? All the good junior hockey.
They traded a bunch of their veterans at the deadline for some young talent, though. So I think that team is going to be turning it around next year. And if they don't, like I mentioned, maybe he'll get traded at the deadline, but it's probably more likely that London just takes a run at it next year. So yeah, maybe that's something that'll be good for him. I still think the World Juniors is going to be the best experience for him, because Bouchard's already won a Memorial Cup when he was a rookie in London. So it never gets talked about. Everyone is always talking about Dobson because he just won a Memorial Cup.
Yeah.
People forget that 2 years ago, as a raw rookie, Bouchard did it at 16. So he's been through that experience. The next experience I really want him to have is to be the number one defenseman and potentially captain of Team Canada when they have the World Juniors in Vancouver this Christmas. That's what I think is going to be huge for him. Let's see how he matches up against the best in the world now.
Yeah.
Jack Hughes, yeah.
Yeah, and there's, the U.S. is going to have one hell of a team for the World Juniors. Yeah, Jack Hughes, Turcotte, you name it, right? Spencer Knight, those guys are, that should be a heck of a team. Okay, guys, let's chat about the development camp. Eric, I think that you paid some pretty good attention to it. What's your thoughts coming out of development camp?
Yeah, I wish I could have watched it closer. I was in the States while the camp was going on, but I always made sure at the end of the day to listen to all the interviews, watch all the highlights from camp and the Billy Moore's Cup. It's nice to see that we are starting to build up that talent pool of prospects, because all you hear every time someone comes on TSN 1260 is, the Oilers are bottom 5 in prospects. They have no one coming. The cupboards are bare. You hear those three things like all the time. And now it's great to see that the prospect pool is actually start building up. I tweeted out a couple weeks ago my top 10 Oilers prospects at the moment. And there's some talent in that group. I think that we might not be where Tampa Bay is right now, but it's not in the bottom 5 anymore, especially with some guys like Bouchard and Yamamoto at the top. I had Bear number 3. So there's some good players there. Even Cooper Marody. People talk about the Oilers got nothing for Patrick Maroon. Well, they got a pick that turned into Marody, and he might be ready to play 20 NHL games at some point this year. So I think that it's not as bad as people make it out to be. Some of the experts.
I had McCurdy and Staples on the last episode.
Great episode.
And McCurdy he said he was at all of the developmental camps. And one of the things, that struck me is he was just talking about the hockey IQ of Cooper Marody. He suggested his skating was maybe not as great, but the hockey IQ was there. And to me, if the Oilers can work with him, that's a player that we're probably not talking enough about. He's a right winger, which everybody seems to, focus on lately. And
that's something that surprised me too. You hear question marks about Marody's skating ability. I mean, go back and read any of the scouting reports on the guy and what everyone was saying about him when he got traded to Edmonton back in March. All they were talking about was how the guy had blazing speed.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, Google Cooper Marody scouting report, and one of the top assets that it has is his speed. So I'm not sure where all this talk about his foot speed is now in question. Maybe it's just more straight line speed, and he doesn't have four-way skating ability or something like that. But I was a little bit confused when I first heard that people were questioning his speed.
Well, he was the standout too, right? When he got to Bakersfield at the end of the season, right?
3 points in 3 games.
Yeah, and that wasn't wasn't just 3. Like, he had I saw highlight after highlight from him in those games, so he was pretty good.
He looked slick, didn't he?
Yeah, just
like that is a slick hockey player.
Kelly, your thoughts? Did you keep up with the development camp at all?
Yeah, barely, as much as I could from over here, right? So, sounds like Rodrigue did okay, and sounds like we got a shooter and Maximov.
Oh yeah, 2 quick goals from him.
SPR is huge on him, eh? SPR really likes Maximov.
He's a one-shot scorer.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those highlights. Man, he can zip that puck, dude. He's got a nice shot. I always liked him for a couple of years. He kind of brought him out as a bit of a wild card a couple drafts ago, right? So always keep an eye out when SPR picks a player and sticks on him, because he's got a pretty good eye for finding wild cards. I think it's hard not to notice what Yamamoto did in that camp. He's obviously better than than everybody, so tells me he's too good for junior and will probably fit right in at an AHL level. Skinner did pretty well too, if I don't recall. His future looks bright. I think I remember hearing about him when he was like, 15 or 16, getting a few games in with the Hurricanes. Like,
2013 that would have been.
Yeah, he got in junior hockey really young, and played very well for a young guy. So I think we can. I think just in general, like you guys were saying, the things are looking a lot brighter.
Yeah, for all the
on the prospect front, thanks to Chiarelli and his staff. Right, it's a nice change of pace now that we're not trying to draft Milan Lucic again, or we're wasting our second and third rounders.
For all the crap that Chiarelli gets for trading away, I don't even want to mention the names because that'll just start a whole nother thread. But he has been excellent drafting, as Kelly just said. Keith Gretzky and him have put together, I think, 4 pretty good drafts in 2015, 16, 17, 18. And in a couple of those drafts, they didn't even have a second round pick, like Kelly also mentioned. So for them to get guys like Maximov in the 5th round, a guy who was at one point top 5 in goal scoring in the OHL this year, and the youngest player in that group too. To get a guy like that, and then to get a goalie like Rodrigue this year, Skinner last year. I mean, he's finding these great picks. Ethan Bear and Caleb Jones, 7 picks apart in the 5th round in 2015. If we had scouted this well 5 years ago, I don't think we'd be in the spot we are today. We also wouldn't have Connor McDavid. But so thank you, Mac T, for that. But but I'm much happier, and I think most Oilers fans are, with the past few drafts. I don't know if anyone could be disappointed with this one. We got arguably a top 5 pick who fell to number 10.
Yep.
Seems to be a habit that even, consensus high picks fall to the Oilers somehow. And with Puljujarvi, I mean, that was another one. But finding guys in other rounds, like Ryan McLeod, Bob McKenzie had him going 23rd overall. And I know some people question his aggression and his jam, yeah. But I mean, man, skilled player with speed, named after Ryan Smith. Yeah, hard not to like that guy, and to get him at 40th overall, that's huge.
Well, and he's got hockey in his family, right? His brother was drafted 9th or 10th overall last year, or the season prior.
I think 12th in 2016.
Yeah, okay.
I believe.
So I mean, he can, hopefully with the right amount of coaching. I mean, this is a kid that I've heard he's got unreal skill, right? And the biggest question mark is, can he take it from the perimeter and drive that skill into the net? I brought that up, and I said that. I mean, I read a lot about him, of course, after we drafted him. And one of the guys from he was playing for Niagara, right? I think somebody from there, or Mississauga. That's where he was playing.
Ryan McLeod, Mississauga still.
Yeah. One of the fans from Mississauga got on me right away and said, that's BS, right? Like, he's got lots of drive. So, it'd be interesting to see what, everybody, talks about that. It's quite clear. They say he's got way more skill than his brother, but his brother's got way more drive. So, I think you can learn that. I think that's a switch. At some point, you get it or you don't. And that's the difference between making the NHL or not making the NHL. But you look up and down that prospect list at the development camp. It's pretty good. You talked about Rodrigue and Skinner, and I was actually a bit of a fan of Starrett. He did well in the ECHL. He played 1 or 2 games in Bakersfield. And he was kind of like one of those pickups from nowhere, right? And we haven't even talked about Safin, who played last year in Bakersfield at the end of the season too. He looked half decent.
I really like that kid too. He's more of a long-term project in my opinion. But when he gets to the NHL at 23, let's say, that's going to be a 6'5", 220-pound winger who has skill and is rangy and has a great wingspan, keeping pucks alive in the zone, and a pretty good shot. That's going to be another depth pick that'll look really good for the Oilers.
So the guy I was curious about, and Kelly, Eric, I don't know either of you heard anything about him, Dudek. I mean, he was kind of the unknown thrown in. The throw in, what trade was he thrown in on there?
Maroon.
The Maroon trade. How did he show in camp? Anybody see anything about him? I mean, I didn't read anything about him, so maybe he was, basically a non-starter. I don't know. But either of you hear anything? I'm just curious, because he seemed to be one of those let's pull a rabbit out of a hat sort of things. And I thought maybe, Keith Gretzky saw something in him or who knows what, right? But either of you hear anything?
I didn't hear anything specifically. He's a center though, right? So, it's never bad to have as many of those as you can get. I'm guessing he's not one of New Jersey's, or was one of New Jersey's highly thought of prospects. Otherwise they wouldn't have tossed him in for a guy like Patrick Maroon, who they're only probably going to have for the playoff run. So that would be my guess, is that he isn't a top tier prospect, more like a B, C level prospect. But to get that guy, I mean, it never hurts to have a few more prospects in the system. I'm just happy they were able to take the 3rd round pick they got from New Jersey and turn that into Cooper Marody. So my focus personally is more on Marody than Dudek.
Yeah. And Kelly, you hear anything about him at all, or?
No, I didn't hear anything. I heard more on McPhee.
Yeah,
his teammate in Boston.
He looked good, didn't he?
So,
yeah,
McPhee was buzzing about, which is a good sign. We need those gritty, blue collar players. What I was curious about was Benson. He's kind of coming in pretty popular, right? And I didn't hear too much on the Tyler Benson front.
Yeah, I mean, he was he had really a few weeks of brilliance in the WHL. It was him and Yamamoto seemed to be fighting for who was going to be Player of the Week a couple weeks in a row. I actually was thinking about him too, in that really kind of felt like he he didn't maybe he's not taking that next step. I don't know, but I didn't hear anything about him, which also kind of concerned me.
Anytime
Eric?
they talk about Benson, when you get one of the prospect guys on let's say Low Tide's show or Stoffer's show, you hear them talk about Benson's got really good smarts, passes the puck well, he's good skater. He's going to be they think he's going to be somewhere between a second line, third line tweener. Maybe he's got a chance, if someone's hurt, to play with McDavid in a pinch, just because he thinks the game so well. As much as Tyler Benson, I'm hoping that he turns out to be a good player, it's always going to bother me that they didn't take Alex DeBrincat with that pick. Because that, you can talk about trading the 2015 pick that turned into Matt Barzal or whatever, but I would, if I had my choice to go back, I would still get DeBrincat, because that is a natural goal scorer with built-in chemistry, who played 2 years with Connor McDavid from junior. You bring that guy in, and he is going to be an absolute goal-scoring machine on McDavid's line. He was the perfect fit, and they passed on him. Now, a lot of teams passed on him by the time Chicago got him at, I think 36th overall or whatever it was. But this is a guy who scored 50 goals in every single year he played in junior. Not just when he was with McDavid, but after McDavid left Erie. So that one will always bother me, because I'm just like, man, that would have been the perfect guy to have with them. And then I'm thinking in my head, well, they must have an issue with small guys. And then what do the next year? They draft Yamamoto in the first round. So it's like, I'm trying to figure out why he wasn't the guy for them. So I know Benson was consensus top 15 at one point before he got hurt, but man, how good would DeBrincat look? He scored 28 goals as a rookie in Chicago. probably would have been a perennial 30-goal scorer in Edmonton with McDavid. So, yeah, Benson's the expectations for Benson are going to be high now, knowing what they could have had.
Yeah. Well, I think Eric, that pretty much solidifies you as an Oilers fan because you're thinking about what could have been. We all, as Oilers fans, we all have something that could have and should have been.
Always.
Some of us sit on the Hall trade. Some of us sit on the Eberle trade, Barzell, you name it. There's a whole bunch of wish they had moments for Oilers fans.
All those years they had bad picks in the early 2000s. Why couldn't you have taken Datsuk and Zetterberg?
Exactly. Guys, there's not much now going on. It's been pretty quiet. I think as far as the Oilers go, most people knew what they were going to do. There's some question about Lucic, whether he was going to move. That looks not to be the case. Next step, of course, is finalizing this Nurse deal. I really hope they get that done in the next couple of days. So, the guys and the team can kind of sit through the rest of the summer and know who their teammates are going to be. And I think going into a season, especially one where you're starting overseas, that can't be a bad thing. To not have any questions around the team, and a little bit of time to relax. And, the guys will get together over the summer, I'm sure, in different places. And do you see anything happening between now and the end of August? I am, my own thought is, other than Nurse, we're, and maybe, just maybe, Chiarelli does something for a forward, but I don't think we're going to do anything more. Anybody? Kelly, what's your thought? What do you see? Anything else happening for the Oilers between No,
I think they're doing a great job by doing nothing.
Yeah.
Or just taking it easy, right? Kind of picking away at the free agents and not rushing things, which is a huge issue they've had the past, 15 years. There could be a trade. There's with Chiarelli as GM, there always can be a trade. It depends what he's got a bone for, right? And it doesn't sound like he wants that high-end defenseman anymore. So I don't think we have to worry about that so much. And I think he's good on the Lucic front at the moment. Unless Lucic really really wants to force his way out, which would be a pretty dick move on his part. I think the roster's set. I think that's what we're going to look at come game one of the regular season, and maybe PTOs. That'll be it. They'll bring some veterans in on PTOs, and then see what happens there during training camp. But I don't see them making any more enormous moves. They've done it every year since Chiarelli's been GM, and it hasn't quite worked out.
Yeah, no, PTOs are, yeah. Well, and we'll always remember. I said that I was gonna say we always remember, and then I forget. I'm thinking of the guy that went to Calgary, and I can't remember his name.
Versteeg.
Oh, yeah, Versteeg. Bloody hell! I will always remember. Oh, I forgot. Oh man. Well, yeah, guys. Let's. I just want to take a couple minutes, and then I think we'll call it an episode. There's a couple. I'm probably going to take the rest of the summer off as far as episodes are concerned. I might. I should say Oilers episodes. There's a couple people I'm going to do a couple episodes with. I'm hoping or I'm lining up. There's a fellow doing a new website. Actually, SPR introduced him to me. His name's Hart. He is doing puckpedia.com. Have you guys checked that out?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, check it out right now. It's actually it's going to be like a cap friendly, but with a little bit more information.
Sure.
Seems to have done a pretty decent job so far. So I'm going to do a little interview with him and kind of get his take on what he's doing with that site and where that's going. So that's one. I talked to just on Twitter Shane Sander.
Oh, he's a good follow
from the Hockey Writers. I'll probably get him on. He's a good follow, and I don't expect we'll have much Oilers news to talk about, but I kind of want to get his feelings on just hockey in general and where that's going. There's the I've been talking today a little bit about the Hlinka Gretzky Memorial Cup, or I guess they don't call it. Do they still call it the Memorial Cup? I think it's just the Hlinka Gretzky Cup now.
When it's in Edmonton, it is, and then when it goes back to the Czech Republic next year, it goes back to the Ivan Hlinka Memorial Tournament.
Oh, okay. Did you? So I don't know if you saw my tweet on that. It actually started in Japan, this tournament, which is kind of interesting, and was played in Mexico at one point as well. So it's kind of got an interesting history. I haven't paid much attention to this tournament until this year, mostly because, it's never played. It's been played once in Canada. It was in like 96 in Vancouver. I vaguely remember it, but I haven't paid a ton of attention to it. Canada has pretty much won it every year except for 3 times. So like 21 golds. The U.S. never really finishes that high, but they don't send their best players. So that's kind of interesting.
They dominate the R18 tournament every April when all the best Canadian players are usually still in the CHL playoffs.
Yeah.
So that's kind of their tournament to win. And then they don't send the best possible team they can in August for this tournament. Just kind of interesting how they do that.
Yeah, and it's too bad because what's that? Chicken? Yeah.
Said they're chicken.
Well, so that was why the Hlinka tournament came to be, was mainly an off-season best on best under 18 tournament. And I don't think it's been achieved, just given the fact that the U.S. The 5 players that they had that qualified to play. I think it was Spencer Knight, Caulfield, for sure Jack Hughes. I don't think. Anyway, I can't remember. There were 5 players that they're not bringing to this tournament. So, but there's still some good players. So if you anybody listening, if you check out my tweets on it, a couple guys, the guys from Hockey Prospect, he messaged Craig Button, commented as well to say some of the players we should be looking for. One of them's Lafreniere from the QMJHL. He said he's going to be one of the top 2020 draft prospects. And then, of course, there's a guy playing for the Oil Kings that will be in the top 10 probably, or is slated to be, or looks like he'll be. That's Matthew Robertson from the Oil Kings. And then the other guy that Button said was plays for Lethbridge. And I've seen him play. That's what's his name? Dylan
Cousins.
Yeah. And he Button thinks that he could be fighting for first overall.
Really?
Or that's kind of the indication he said. I mean, if you go back and look at what he responded, because I asked the question. I said, who should we be? Right, guys, like who should we be watching? And so he said, Dylan Cousins. I have not seen to date a better player available for the 20. Oh, okay. So Lafreniere, he thinks is the best player for the 2020 draft.
Oh.
Dylan is a top prospect for the 2019 draft, and only behind Hughes, in my opinion. So that's kind of interesting.
Maybe Cousins got a nice shot. He's probably got a pro shot right now. He can fire the puck like mad. Lafreniere scored almost as many goals as a 16-year-old as Zadina did, who just went third overall. Like Lafreniere could have went in this year's draft, probably top 10. He's that good, and he's not available for another 2 drafts, right? Who else? Capo Caco, the Finn guy, is that guy coming over? Because that guy is going to be outstanding. He's like a Patrick Laine that can skate.
So it was Russ Bitely. He's one of the scouts with Hockey Prospects. So he said U.S. He said keep an eye on Farinacci, Mastro Simone, Silyanov, Robertson Coaster, something like Weber. And then he said Kaliev. And then, of course, Byram, I've heard a lot about, and Krebs I've watched. Dak, Murray, and Suzuki on a Canada roster. Some names.
Yeah, Byram's going to be cool. He's a great skater, and so he's going to be a nice one. Not only can he skate really well, he's got really nice edges, kind of like Boquist, right? But I guess he hits like a freight train too. So that's kind of cool. That'd be a cool player to watch on the back end. Krebs, I haven't watched a lot on Krebs yet. To me, sounds kind of like a more skilled Taves.
Yeah.
He's a great leader, great two-way player. Has all the skills to be a top producer in the WHL.
So I know, Kelly, you're not going to be able to make it out here for that, but Eric, any chance you get to go? Or
you know what? I'm not 100% sure. I know I'll be coming out to Edmonton in September for a preseason game. I got a buddy who's a really big Winnipeg Jets fan, so we always go to at least one preseason and one regular season Oilers Jets game a year. So might not make it out in August. We'll see. That would be really cool to go to, though, and see kind of the first look at the 2019 prospects. I'm also just doing a quick search of that Dylan Cousins here on Elite Prospects, and his rookie numbers in the dub match up pretty comparable to Leon Draisaitl's. So maybe that's like different build a little bit. Draisaitl's a little stockier than Cousins is, a little more solid, but maybe that's the kind of upside we could see out of this guy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be an excellent tournament. I mean, for anyone who wants to see some future NHLers, that's a great one to go to, especially for Team Canada, right? But there's always a few with the other teams as well that are players that you should keep an eye out for the upcoming draft.
And this is also getting way ahead of myself here, but I know Bob Nicholson said that once the Arena District was starting to get a little closer to completion, they wanted to start having more events like this. So maybe a good showing here at the Gretzky-Holinka this summer and 2 summers from now could lead to more things like getting an NHL All-Star game, getting a draft. There was even talk a while ago that Edmonton could potentially host the 2020 World Cup of Hockey. So I think that this is going to be a really good test run to see if they can get their name into that category to try and compete for some of those bigger events.
Yeah, I think this Holinka tournament is. I just haven't heard enough about it, and I'm pretty excited that it's going to be here, in our neighborhood, and we need to get a chance to see it. Yeah. And this is exciting. I mean, there's all these guys will be there, Button and the Hockey Prospects guys. I think they're all going to be there. It's going to be a fun tournament to watch. And if you can't make it, I know that it's going to be on TSN as well. So you can stream it or watch it on TV. But yeah, I think as we as Oilers fans now, I mean we can get a little bit more excited about the team's ability to pick prospects, right? And so if you're a fan, you're listening to the podcast, and these are good tournaments to get an idea of what's up and coming and understand who these guys are prior to the draft year. Now's the time I like this tournament because, we can have a look or preliminary look at some of these players, and understand before they go into their CHL seasons or their seasons overseas, and have an idea of what to expect, and get to know the names. And usually around Christmas time you start to get a feel for who's the favorite to go first overall, and I doubt very much that's going to change from Jack Hughes, but crazier things have happened, right? So kind of neat. And some people are talking that even Turcotte for the US there, that he's also another player that could come from nowhere and be in the top three, right? So it's exciting. 2019 looks exciting. We've had some good prospects come up, Lincoln tournament, I think. And to your point, Eric, if we can, if the Edmonton area can, back a tournament like this, it's just going to be, great for other tournaments.
And the last thing I'll say tonight is I hope the Oilers aren't picking until at least 20th overall in that draft.
Yeah, you don't want to see Jack Hughes as an Oiler. Because
sure, I'd love it, but I would love, but I'd love it, but I'd hate it at the same time too. Let's hope we're picking around the Yamamoto spot or higher for the next 7 years.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. Yeah, you know what? That's a good segue to finish it off. Kelly, any last thoughts for tonight?
No, not really, man. It's been a good podcast, and the rest of the summer is going to be super boring when it comes to Oilers, unless they take the leash off Chiarelli, of course. And
yeah,
I'm looking forward to a nice slow brew this summer, and getting ready for the the off season come the fall.
Eric, any last thoughts?
No, I just want to say thanks for having me on. Hopefully, I did a half decent job of filling SPR shoes. I've listened to you three do a podcast for a long time, so to kind of jump in here and work with you and Kelly has been awesome. I obviously used to do some writing for Kelly on Beer League Heroes too, so big shout out to that guy. He's a great guy to chat with as well. So yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, he's all right.
We actually almost.
He's all right.
We actually almost met once. Well, kind of met. Do you remember that, Kelly?
Yeah, there's actually only two people that have met me in or actually three maybe that have met me in real life in terms of the Oilers blogosphere.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we saw each other at an Oilers game from different decks.
Yeah. I was in the lows section, and Eric was in the poor people section.
Nice.
I was up on the second deck. That was actually my first time ever at Rogers Place, but I was at least
it was mine too.
Cool. So I was at least able to actually wave down and see Kelly.
Oh, in the poor guys section.
Yeah, we waved.
So I don't even know what you look like, Kelly. To be fair.
Kelly's probably the best looking Oilers.
I'm very good looking. Just remember that.
That doesn't surprise me.
That's how it goes. Strap her down, boys.
One last thing, guys. So, probably people will have quit listening by this time. But Eric, you don't know. Come the new season, I am going to be changing the name of this podcast to the Heavy Hockey Podcast.
Okay.
And so what we're going to do is I'll have SPR and Dirtbag Donnie doing their late night with the Oil Night. That'll be on the Oilers Live channel. And then we'll have the Heavy Hockey Podcast. So it kind of allows me to do a little bit more general podcasting. Still it'll be an Oilers bend to it. Mm-hmm. And then my intention is to do, right now it looks like I want to do every Thursday night. I'm going to do the live broadcast. So
That's
we'll
awesome.
and that will still be called Oilers Live. So that'll be the Oilers Live broadcast. People will be able to call in and so the only thing left, I've got the intro done. Kelly, you liked it? Sounded good?
Yeah, it's rock and roll, man. I dig it.
Yeah. So Yeah, I got the intro. The name is thanks to Dirtbag. He came up with that.
That's a cool name.
I'm actually quite surprised that it was all available, and so that so I've got that set up, and then we'll keep the Oilers live broadcast going on Thursdays, and people will be able to call in, maybe have some guests, and continue to go down that route. So that's kind of neat.
That's awesome.
And still looking for a really good analytics based podcast to complete the
trio.
The trio. And I'm who I would love to have do the podcast is Oilers Nerd Alert, because him and SPR get along so well. I think secretly they're best friends. I'm still recording here. All right, well, we'll end it here. Thanks, guys, for joining tonight.
Take care, man.